you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another ESO build video. Today I'm going to be giving you the update to the burn build, the Magicka DK for the Wolfhunter DLC. Now this doesn't require any trial loot whatsoever. However, if you want to use some, I can show you which to swap out and to make it a little bit stronger if you really want to, but you do not require it, and it is very powerful in the state that it's in at the moment. So first of all, I'm going to go into the stats, pop a potion, make sure our food is on, all the buffs and good stuff. Now, we are sitting on 45.6k max Magicka, which is enormous. We're also sitting on 17.1k max health, so we're not squishy. We are at 863 recovery, but that will be covered by our passives and a couple of things that I'll show you, a few tips and tricks. 2.5k max spell damage, but that goes a lot higher, and we're almost 60% crit. Our resists are 14, almost 15k on spell resistance, and not far short of 10k on physical. You can slot a resist buff if you prefer, but you don't necessarily need to. Not in all content anyway, especially since you heal off your damage. Anyway, we'll not worry too much about that. That's specific to content. But we're also 64 points into max Magicka, of course. We're using a stage 4 vampire, and we're using a thief Mundus stone. Now, the Mag DK does use a lot of single target stuff as well as dots, of course, but the single target stuff you do not want to fail to crit. Well, as much as possible anyway, so that is why we're using as much crit as we can. Now, we are also using max health, max magic food. No witch mothers, it's not required. Now, also if you do use Witch Mothers, by the way, you're going to go down to 15k health, so you might want to put on a glyph if you had to do that. I wouldn't recommend it. Now, I'm going to go over the skills in detail. I will explain where every single one of these come from, exactly where they start off, what morph to use, etc, and you'll be able to understand exactly why they're there. And then I'll go into rotations and gear and stuff a bit later on. Don't panic, I'm going to explain everything. First ability, Burning Embers. This is in the Ardent Flame skill line. It's the second ability you unlock. It's very early on in the game, and this applies a single target damage over time flame effect to the target, but with a little bit of a bonus. If it runs out, or if the enemy dies, or if you reapply it, the amount of damage that has been done over the duration of its uptime, you will receive 75% of that total damage inflicted back in a form of a heal. So, if it goes for the full 16k, and it runs out, or you reapply it, you will get a heal back for 75% of that done. Obviously, it will crit occasionally, and it will do a lot more than 16, almost 17k, but you can heal to full, basically, off a couple of seconds worth of this. It's really powerful. It's very simple to apply. You have to be close, of course. There's the claw, and it does damage every 2 seconds. So you see that as a burn and status effect, ignore that. 4.1k there, see 4.1, and so on and so forth. If you see where I'm going with this. If you reapply it, it will start the dot again, but you will consume a heal based on the damage already done. So obviously the higher your stats, the more damage you do, the bigger the heal. And this is used in our rotation all the time. We always use it once every rotation, but if you get in trouble, just reapply it and you can claim a heal from it. It's very powerful indeed. Now, this is the second ability you unlock in the Ardent Flame skill line. It starts off as Searing Strike. You want to morph it to Burning Embers specifically. Rearm and Trap. This, of course, is our crit damage bonus. Now this comes from the Fighters Guild. You have to have Fighters Guild 8, I believe, to unlock this, and then you want to morph it to Rearming Trap. We place this on the ground. It traps targets that can be immobilized. If bosses can't, don't worry, you still get the buff. While this is applied, of course, this does physical damage underneath the target. There you go, it pops. The physical damage isn't that much because we're using magic damage as our base, but it will still apply, obviously, damage full stop. But for it being active, we will gain 10% increased critical damage. It lasts 6 seconds. It reapplies and lasts for another 6 seconds. So for the full 12 seconds, we get minor force, increasing our critical damage done. So any crits that we get is increased. Now that is very important. That's why we have such high crit as well, because we don't want to miss the single target crits, and we want to make sure they're stronger. So get this as soon as possible. You can swap this out for Race Against Time from the Psijic Order skill line if your group has God knows how much sustain going on. Like if you've got all the shinies. So you've got Worm, you've got Ellie Drain, you're getting off-balance whips, which will make more sense in a little while. Your heavy attacks from off-balance are returning lots and lots of resources, and you've got everything covered. You're taking synergies the lot. If you are very comfortable and you're never running out of sustain, then of course you can use Race Against Time, and then you can save your stamina for blocks and dodge rolls. However, this is absolutely fine, so just pay attention to some of those mechanics and don't get caught out too much. This should be absolutely fine. I use it all the time. I don't even need to swap to the other one. So the choice is yours. Either way, both skills do apply minor force, so you can have one or the other. Just be aware, again, that if you don't have loads and loads of sustain inside your group, and there's not enough synergies coming in, and you are struggling, Race Against Time is going to cost you quite a bit, so be careful. Anyway, next ability is Crushing Shock. This is actually not part of the build per se. It is there for passives only, which I'm going to get to, but basically this is an interrupt. From long range or short range, doesn't matter. If you hit the target with this, you'll interrupt them. Now you can bash or use this, but fundamentally, as far as the build is concerned, this is here for base bonuses. I will get to that in the passives, but if you want to use something else like Impulse to lower targets' health by 10%, if you morph this to Pulsar, you can use that. You can put Ellie Drain on there if you prefer. Maybe you haven't got it in your group, whatever. As long as a Destro Staff skill ability is on this bar or in this slot, you must have a Destruction Staff skill here, no matter what. So it's only there basically for stats, but it does have utility as well. Also note, by the way, I'm going to explain the whip in a moment. Obviously, the whip is close range, as you can see. But if you're in mechanics and you've got to move around, you can still do damage with your weaving from long range with Crush and Shock and interrupt at the same time. So close up, oh, we've got to move, there's a bomb coming, get out of the way, get back in, and then carry on with your whips again. That can be utilized. I have done that on the live stream a few times, and it's pretty sneaky, I guess, but it does help. Anyway, flex slot. Destro Staff skill in there no matter what. The next ability is Inner Light. This is in the Mages Guild skill line, which is down here. You need Mages Guild 2 for this. Don't worry about the actual activation of the ability, although if you do apply it, you will get increased light attack damage from the passive in the Mages Guild, which I'll get to, but don't worry yourself about that at the moment. What you need to worry about is the fact that this gives you 5% increased max Magicka for being on your bar, and it will give you 10% increased critical chance in the form of Major Prophecy. Now, the next ability is Flame Lash. This is the first ability to unlock in the Ardent Flame skill line. Starts off as Lava Whip. You want to morph it to Flame Lash. Now, I know there's lots of people out there screaming that you should use the other whip, which gives you a very small amount of spell damage towards your Ardent Flame abilities. But this one is incredible. If the target is off balance, which they will be at some point, they have 5 seconds uptime on off balance and 15 seconds downtime. During that time, you can Flame Whip for free. That free whip obviously does more damage as well, and it can heal you. And this can happen once every 3 seconds. So during the off-balance cooldown period, obviously you can't gain from this, but during off-balance for the 5 seconds, if you get a whip to start with, like as soon as it hits, you do one whip. 3 seconds later, you can do another one. So that's 2 free spammables in a space of 3 seconds in your front bar rotation, which I will demonstrate. And you get to heal for the privilege and get more damage. It's disgusting. It's very, very powerful indeed. I have no idea why people aren't utilizing it as much as they should be. Anyway, moving on. Shooting Star. This is our Mages Guild passive ability. You don't actually have to use the ability. This is just here for passives, which I will get to in a moment. However, this is a bit of an oh shit button as well. So if you are close to killing the enemy, there's nothing else left to kill, there's about 1 million health left on the boss, you don't have enough for your back bar ultimate, which by the way is expensive, you can fire this off in an emergency. It will give you resources back, it will hit really, really hard single target in initial hit, as long as it crits, because it can fail and be really crap. And it will do a flame damage over time on the floor as well for almost 12 seconds. Every enemy you hit will give you 11 ultimate back. But like I said, this isn't used very often. We actually use our back bar ultimate all the time because it is incredible, but we will get to that in a moment. This is your oh shit button, and above all, it's there for passives. Now, the back bar. Harness Magicka, which comes from... Oh, by the way, you need Mages Guild level 10 for this. So if you don't have it, don't panic. You can put something else on your bar. Maybe Magma Shell or something like that in case of an emergency. Harness Magicka is in the Light Armor skill line. It starts off as Annulment. Morph it to Harness Magicka. It's a very simple damage shield. Coats your health. You see that purple color over my red bar. I can get hit for that amount of damage, and then I get hit in the health. There's no resist applied. It will just be flat damage, but that will protect you. Use it in emergencies to keep yourself alive. However, if you do absorb spell damage or magic damage, whatever, up to 3 times before it runs out, you will absorb magic and you will get magic back. So you get like half the cost back almost. It's really, really handy in oh shit situations or during situations where you're getting hit with tiny little projectile magickas and stuff like that. It's quite nice. Anyway, you need a shield regardless as a magicka, because otherwise you're going to die. Blockade of Fire. This is in the Destruction Stuff skill line. Starts off as Wall of Elements, then you morph it to Elemental Blockade. Now it's called Blockade of Fire because we're using a Flame Staff. If you're using a different type of element for your staff, it will be called something else, but this is called Blockade of Fire. Now what this does is very, very simple. Wall of Elements down. I'll call it Wall of Elements because what it starts at. All this here, everyone caught inside here takes fire damage every second for 8 seconds. And because you're using a flame staff, this has a little bonus as well. Burning enemies, if you proc the burning status effect, which is a chance effect that happens from fire, any burning enemies will take an additional 20% more damage from this ability. So it gets really, really powerful. Keep this under the target at all times. Next ability is Engulfing Flames, and if you don't know what this is, you are about to find out. This is incredible, not just for you, but for your group as well, especially for those people using flame abilities. What this does is, this is a typical Dragon Breath. There's the fire, very nice. Anything caught inside of that will take damage over time for 10 seconds, which is really strong as well. But enemies affected by this will also take 10% more damage from all fire damage. So you and your group all get a 10% increase to fire damage. This must be on the target 100% of the time if you can help it. This is the third ability, by the way, in the Ardent Flame skill line. Starts off as Fiery Breath, morph it to Engulfing Flames. So you can see we're using 3 abilities from the skill line already. Now, the next ability is Flames of Oblivion. This is the last ability to unlock in this skill line. You don't have to have this if you're not comfortable with the rotation, which I'll get to. You can replace this with Inner Light if you prefer, and then just never press it, and you always get that crit bonus. As you can see, this gives us Major Prophecy on the back bar as well as the front. We don't get the Mage's Guild bonus to Inner Light, giving us the 5% max Magicka, but we do have a Fireball that we can fire. Now, you press this, lasts for 15 seconds, and every 5 seconds it will fire a straight Fireball at the target. So if I stand near him, as long as he's aggroed, if he's not aggroed, it won't fire. 2, 1, Fireball. Oh, ignore that. 2, 1, another Fireball. Now, that will happen every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. You can activate it and actually just keep firing it, but I wouldn't recommend it. Keep that active all the time, but like I said, if you're not comfortable with the rotation with this in it, you can just put Inner Light in here instead. Still get the crit bonus, get the max Magicka bonus, and you'll be fine. Your damage will be a tiny bit less, but it's up to you. Also, this is your flex slot as well. If, for example, you are a chainer in VMOL or whatever, or you need to interrupt at close range with Deep Breath and stuff like that, you can put chains on that particular slot to pull enemies in, or in the Draconic Power skill line, you can use Inhale, morph to Deep Breath, and stun or interrupt nearby targets that are activating abilities. This is a flex slot, mostly used for this ability for single target DPS, but in situations where you might have to swap stuff out, you can use this slot, not the others, to change. Also, you can put a resist buff there if you prefer as well, depending on the content. But above all, straightforward Flames of Oblivion on there. Earth and Heart. This is very important. Eruption. This is the 5th ability in the skill line. You must level this skill line up. When I get to the passives, you're going to know why this is so important. But you need this as soon as possible. This is your ground-based AoE. Goes alongside Wall of Elements. And those two do lots and lots of damage to everyone caught inside of it. It applies a snare as well, but this lasts a really long time. This ability lasts 18 seconds. It does an initial hit, and then lasts 18 seconds as well. Now, obviously, we don't want to use it every single rotation because 1, it's expensive, and 2, we're going to overlap it a little bit too early. So you want to make sure that you put this in your rotation every second rotation. It does damage every 1 second. It is flame damage. It can apply a burning status effect just like everything else we're using. It is buffed, of course, by Engulfing Flames, so is everything else. And you can make sure that your Wall of Elements does more damage if anything procs burning status effects from any of these abilities while inside of it. So you can see where these are all kind of working together. Now, just to confirm where this comes from, it's the Earth and Heart skill line. It starts off as Ash Cloud, morph it to Eruption. If you use the other morph, it will be a heal instead of damage. So be very clear which one you actually buy. Now, of course, our ultimate, this is our bread and butter ultimate of the whole entire build, or class, if you like, Standard of Might. Ardent Flame skill line, you get it at level 12 in Ardent Flame, and this you want to morph from Dragonknight Standard to Standard of Might. Any targets caught inside of this will take massive flame damage every 1 second for 17 seconds. But above all, while standing inside of this, not only do you take 15% less damage, but you also deal 15% more damage. So while this is active, every single ability that is already running, or that you reapply, or that you introduce, is boosted to hell. It's incredible. Also, nearby targets can be shackled or chained by a friendly ally synergizing this particular ability, and you will kind of stun them on the spot or immobilize them and do a ridiculous amount of flame damage to them. It's really, really nice indeed. Very, very simple. This is what it looks like. How cool is that? All abilities that you had already running, or that you now apply will do damage, or extra damage I might add. So the trick to this isn't run in, drop the banner, because it's ticking now and we are wasting our damage bonus. What you need to do, make sure you've got your dots down first, make sure that the target is getting hit, and then put the banner down to buff everything that's already running, and then just stay on your rotations. Don't waste it by just throwing it down straight away, because it's just going to be a blank bullet. Make sure you have dots down. Now, passives. Passives are incredibly important. Where do we start? Ardent Flame. Get every single one of these without fail. Every single one. This increases the damage of your burning and poison status effects by 50%. We are going to get a shit ton of burning status effects popping because we're using nothing but fire. Which means if we do proc a burning status effect, it's going to be increased by 50%. So it's stronger than any other class's status effect of that type. Also, while applying burning status effects, you will actually restore 500 Magicka once every 5 seconds. That helps for our sustain as well, so this is really important. When you deal direct damage with an Ardent Flame ability, you reduce the enemy's movement speed by 30%. That's not 100% important, but get it anyway if you have the spare points. Increases the damage of your Fiery Breath, Searing Strike, Dragonknight stand abilities by 3% and the duration by 2 seconds. So, these are morphed obviously, but our Burning Embers, our Engulfing Flames, and our Standard of Might are all boosted in terms of their duration and damage. It's very, very important indeed. Also, increases the damage of your Flame and Poison area of effect abilities. Now, I know that this here is a single target, and so is this. But this is area of effect, and so is this. So they do contribute. Very, very nice indeed. Also, don't forget, Wall of Elements is also area of effect, and it affects flame abilities, not necessarily Ardent Flame skills. So, it's all flame AoE damage, including our monster set. Now, Draconic Power, you will need these. This one increases the amount of damage that you can block, so you mitigate more while blocking. You are going to need that. This one isn't that important because we're not actually using a resist buff or anything from that particular skill line, but if you are, then of course you can get this passive if you want. Also, this one here increases the health recovery of each Draconic Power ability slotted. We're a vampire, health recovery is not important, don't bother about this skill. This you will need, however, because it increases your spell resistance by 3299, and that is massive. We are going to need that. We are squishy, we want to buff up our resists. Earth and Heart. Now, I did say that this is incredibly important. You need to put some of these abilities on your bar while you're leveling to make sure you max this to 50 as soon as possible. This is the most important skill line for the Dragon Knight. Increase the duration of your Earth and Heart abilities. Eruption lasts 18 seconds. This is why. Increased duration. Battle Roar is incredible. When you cast an ultimate ability, this is why we use our banner. It's the most expensive, it's the most useful to us, but you want the cost to be high because when you use an ultimate ability, you restore 46 health, magic, and stamina for every point of the ultimate's cost, meaning the more expensive, the better. You can use an ultimate at a point in time where you think it's ready and you just fire it, or you can time it very specifically versus your sustain and get back loads and loads of stuff at the crucial moments. It's really important. That's why I said the Ice Comet, or the Shooting Star rather, is an oh shit button, because if you are low and you've just got enough to fire that and nothing else, then sometimes you might have to press it to help yourself get your sustain back. When you cast an Earth and Heart ability, you and your group members within 30 meters gain minor brutality for 20 seconds, and if you're in combat, you also generate 3 ultimate. Now, that's once every 6 seconds, by the way, the ultimate is. If you fire Earth and Heart ability, wrong bar, you'll see I have the little hammer there, the blue and purple background. That is minor brutality. So you actually just buffed your group and gave them 5% weapon damage. Really handy. Also, if you use it once every 6 seconds, you will get 3 ultimate. We do use it in our rotation, so naturally we'll obviously get that. And of course, the most important one of all, when you cast an Earth and Heart ability, you restore 990 stamina. This is very, very important. Of course, we're using Beast Trap, which costs stamina, but we use this as well, which gives us stamina back. So Beast Trap is covered. Very handy indeed. Also, if you're in an oh shit moment and you've just ran out of juice, you've broken free a few times, and there's nothing you can do, you're blocking, you don't have any recovery because you're blocking and you're about to die. If you pop Earth and Heart abilities, look at the stamina. Aha! I've seen runners in VMOL run out of stamina. I've told them to use this on the way, and they have just infinite stamina. Really fun. Okay, Destruction Staff. These are important, of course. Make sure you get this ability because your fully charged Flame Staff heavy attacks are increased by 12%, which is very, very important. We are going to need to heavy attack inside our rotation occasionally. Your destruction staff abilities ignore 10% of the enemy's spell resistance, so you do more damage with your destro skills. If you're using Crush and Shock or your Wall of Elements or your light or heavy attacks, anything like that, they all contribute. Increases your chance to apply the burning, concussion, and chilled status effects by 100%. That's not 100% flat, that's 100% on top of what the base may be. That means that we have a higher chance of applying burning, which we are doing all the bloody time, and we need to because of our sets, it's really important. And of course, anything that is burning gets more damage from Wall of Elements or Elemental Blockade. This, you must have a Destruction Staff ability slotted to gain this passive. Equipped in a Flame Staff will increase your damage done with single target abilities. That includes this light attack, this heavy attack, this Crush and Shock if we need to use it, the Whip, the Burning Embers, the Flames of Oblivion, all of that stuff. It all counts. There's an incredibly strong passive. Make sure that you do have a Destruction Staff ability on your bar. And if you'll notice, that is why we have this here, which is the flex slot. I would recommend Crush and Shock over anything else. And we also have a Destruction Staff ability here, one on each bar. Make sure you get those passives. Also, when you kill an enemy with a Destruction Staff ability, you restore 3600 Magicka. That does include Wall of Elements, light attacks, and heavy attacks. So sometimes you might not want to finish them off with a sneaky whip. You might just want to finish off your heavy and get all your stuff back and move on to the next enemy. That choice is yours, of course, depending on the situation. Light armor, we want to get all of these because we're using 5 pieces of light armor. So each one of these will contribute towards your recovery, your reduction to cost, your increased spell resistance, your increased critical chance, which is 10% by the way. I know 2191 is confusing. Hopefully they'll fix that at some point and actually put a flat percentage so we can see what it is so people understand it. But 2191 is 10%. And also increases our spell penetration. 4884 is our flat spell penetration for ourselves for having this passive. Targets generally in PVE have 18,200. What you want to do with your buffs, debuffs, and bonuses is try and meet that and make it 0. So if you have collectively amongst your traits, your skills, your passives, and your buffs and debuffs from your group, if you can knock that target down to 0 from 18,200, that means that you're going to do the most damage that you can possibly do, excluding any additional buffs to your flat stats. Now, of course, with this particular setup, we're pushing somewhere around the 14 mark. You've got room for Alkosh, you've got room for Crusher. I've said this before, obviously, but if you go slightly over cap, that's not necessarily negative, especially with AoE situations, because the single target boss itself is the one that is probably debuffed the most. All the surrounding targets are going to be missing 1 or 2k penetration debuffs, so you going slightly over is not a negative thing. It means you're going to hit them for as hard as you can as well. But if you're in a really, really optimized trial group, they're really, really strict about what you should and shouldn't have, you can manipulate your champion points a little bit and put some more into flat so you do hit that bang on the head. But that's more complicated and up to you and your group. Medium armor, we are using one piece of medium armor, sorry. So you want to get the stam recovery, so you can use your beast trap more often. And of course, you can dodge roll and stuff like that and get your stam back quicker. This one I haven't maxed because I don't, for God knows why, have level 50, but you can also reduce the cost of your dodge roll as well. So I need one more skill point for this, I believe, at level 50. And that will reduce the cost by 4%. At the moment, it's only doing 2, but that's fine because I've got my CPs covered anyway. So get those 2 passives there. Heavy armor, of course, get all these 3. Small amount of physical resistance, you are going to need that, we're a bit squishy. This will add health recovery, which is a bit meh, but if you do take damage once every 4 seconds, you will get 108 Magicka and stand back once every 4 seconds. It's tiny, but it does contribute, especially on top of the 500 we get back once every 5, on top of our potions, on top of our heavies, and all that good stuff. They do add up. And of course, we don't want to die, so we want some more health. So for the 1 piece of heavy we're using, we get an extra 2% max health just for wearing it. Get these passives. Now, we are a vampire, of course we are. We have an increased amount of Magicka and stam recovery by 10% across the board, so we can use more abilities, we can use more beast traps, we can dodge roll and block more because we've got our recovery up. That's really handy, and of course this is the most essential passive to the vampire skill line. While under 50% health, the lower your health is, the less damage you take. You can take up to 33% less damage by having bugger all health left in your bar. So you get tankier the lower your health is, and there's less risk factor because instead of going straight dead, you might go really, really low and just be able to take that heal. It's really, really nice indeed. Yes, of course, you do take more damage from fire as a vampire, but we do have a little perk for our race. And of course, that mitigating effect does stack on top of the fire negative effect, so you will still mitigate the damage regardless. Not as much as the other abilities, but you will still take less from fire the lower you go. So the main thing you need to worry about as far as fire is concerned is staying out of it. Some mechanics obviously can't be avoided, in which case you've got a damage shield. Other mechanics, it's a case of stepping out of it or just moving away. It's really, really simple. Most people don't die because they're a vampire. They die because they stood in shit they shouldn't have. Be careful. Most fire will kill you in one shot anyway. Now, we do want Intimidating Presence from the Fighters Guild skill line to make sure our rearming trap is cheaper. We also want to get this because if you kill undead werewolves or Daedra, you will get 9 ultimate back for each killing blow that you get. So we can use our ultimate more often, we can do more damage, we have more sustain. You see where this is going. Mage's Guild, of course, if you have Mage's Guild 10, you can use Shoot and Star on your front bar, and the reason for that isn't just for the oh shit button, but it is also for this. Increases duration if you use it, but this ability here will give us 2% increased max Magicka and max recovery for our Magicka for being on the bar. 2% per skill. Now we have one here, and one here. Now, we don't have any on the back. Like I said, you can swap this out for Inner Light if you want, and you'll have a small bonus there. But we do have it on the front, which is why we've got so much Magicka. We've got a lot of passives here that all work together alongside of our sets, which put us way over 45k. It's really, really strong. But if you don't have Mage's Guild 10, don't panic. What you can do instead, I don't have it unlocked. I did have it, and I didn't buy it back. Never mind. I'll show you where it is. In the Earth and Heart skill line, you can buy Magma Armor and turn it into Magma Shell, which will give you a basically God mode button. You can put that on your bar for emergencies. It will protect you, and you will only take 3% of your max health in damage per hit for 10.8 seconds. And of course, your group will have a damage shield applied to them for 100% of their max health. It's an oh shit button that you can utilize if you don't have Mage's Guild 10. Undaunted, of course, this is incredibly important. Get this as soon as possible because every synergy you take, and you better make sure you take them because they are all beneficial. Every one that you take, not only will it give you a bonus or do damage or give you stuff back, but it will also give you 4% of all of your resources back each synergy you take. 0 cooldown. Synergies themselves are cooldown by 20 seconds each. So if you pick up a spear, you can't pick up a spear or a bubble for 20 seconds. But you can take 5 or 6 synergies in a row, one after the other, and get 4%, 4%, 4%. Just get this passive as soon as possible and make sure you pick up those synergies. It's really, really important to your sustain. Also, increases your max health, stamina, and Magicka every single pull by 2% for each type of armor worn. We're wearing 1 heavy, 1 medium, and 5 light. So we have 3 different types, giving us a 6% bonus across the board. Really, really important. Support by Sea Shield. Your raid leaders will tell you why if you're doing Sanctum or Phidia. For now, that's not important. And we're, of course, a Dark Elf. We reduce the amount of damage you take from lava, which is meh. You shouldn't be standing anyway. However, this is the important stuff. Increases your maximum magic and stamina by 6%. So our stam pool is up, so we can use Beast Trap more often if we need to. Obviously, it's inside our rotation. We've got recovery. We get stam back from using our Earth and Heart abilities. We're good to use Beast Trap. We're fine. But our max Magicka is increased, so we have more damage. We also increase it by a further 3%, so we've actually got 9% across the board. And we have flame resistance. It's not massive, but it does count. We're a vampire. We take more damage, but this kind of plugs a tiny, tiny gap in there. But something very, very important for the Dark Elf here. Burning status effects do not affect us. We are immune to burning status effects. So the status effects that we apply to the target cannot actually be applied to us. That's really, really strong. It's recent. I think that came in Somerset, but it's really, really good. Also, increases your flame damage done by 7% and increases your frost and shock damage by 2%. We're not using frost and shock unless we use crush and shock, which has got a little bit in there. But overall, we are using pretty much nothing but flame damage. So that 7% bonus is really, really nice. And of course, alchemy. Medicinal use. We are using expensive pots because we want to make sure we can get the most out of this. We are using a pot that requires Larkin's Tears, Lady's Smock, Water Hyacinth, and Cornflower, which is in the form of our spell power pots, which I'll show you in a second. Now, they last 30% longer with this passive. I'll put an alchemy guide in the video description at the bottom there so you can see that, how to level it up really, really fast. Get it to max, dump all your skill points, and then just buy this on its own. Now, the potions that we are using, they're very, very important, are here. They give us increased spell damage by 20% in the form of Major Sorcery. Major Prophecy, which gives us 10% crit on both bars. So if we do drop Flames of Oblivion for perhaps chains or whatever we need to use as utility in our particular group or trial, then of course you will still have it on both bars. Although if you're not using any abilities in there other than the one that's recommended, you will of course have that already, but whatever. And also you gain Magicka back and have Major Intellect, increasing your Magicka recovery by 20%. As you can see, 47.6 second duration with a 45 second cooldown. Yes, that does mean that as soon as it runs out, your buffs is still running and you can reapply it and have 100% uptime. You'll only get that with medicinal use. Otherwise, it's around 36 seconds and you have a 10-second downtime almost. It's quite bad. You need to get that passive as soon as possible. Now, I'm going to go into the gear. No trial loot required. None. Burning Spellweave Inferno Staff. I can hear you screaming, oh my god, it's rare. If your RNG sucks, yes it is. Mine was terrible and it took me a while to get it, but you want this in sharpened and you want a weapon and spell damage glyph on the front. Now, the weapon has to be on your front bar. That's very, very important. The cooldown on this is quite harsh if you have it double barred, because it can proc on the back where you don't want it to, and then by the time you get to the front, it's run out. That can happen. You want to make sure that you always fire it on the front because that's where you're doing your most damage. So 2 pieces this counts as. Staves count as 2 pieces. So the other 3 pieces you can have on your body or on your jewelry. It doesn't matter as long as the staff is on the front. Now it has max magicka, it has spell damage, it has spell crit, and then when you deal damage with a flame ability, you have a 15% chance to apply the burning status effect to the enemy. Remember, that makes your wall of elements do more damage to them as well, and you get magicka back for it. And when this happens, you will increase your spell damage by 525 for 8 seconds, which is more than enough time for your front bar rotation. This can occur once every 12, so it does have a 4-second downtime. That's why you want it to proc on the front, so you can get as much damage as possible while on the front bar. You don't want to fire off on the back, and then when you get to the front, your whips are useless. You don't want to do that. Front bar only on this weapon. Back bar is a Maelstrom Inferno Staff infused. Yes, they changed infused quite considerably. Before, if you fired off a... well, it's not just infused, actually. It's glyphs full stop. If you fire off a wall of elements, anything inside there will take the glyph damage to start with, but when you swap bars, we're not on the bar with the glyph anymore, so it won't fire. It will only fire when we're on this bar. However, that has been altered. When you press this now and swap bars, the glyph on the back bar will fire whenever its cooldown is up, constantly until that ability runs out. Now if you use infused, obviously that gap is closed because it increases, or sorry, reduces the cooldown and increases the damage. This can fire once every couple of seconds, just for applying wall of elements. It is disgusting. And of course on your back bar rotation it can fire in between your weaves as well. So this is very, very strong. I'm not fully in favor of the way they've done this because other glyphs don't actually proc like that. Only damage ones do, which is a little bit one-sided, and it's kind of pushing a trait to be a little bit too powerful in comparison to some of the other ones and negating a bit of choice, but it is what it is. It's fucking strong, so use it. Really, really nice. Also, the Maelstrom weapon itself, anything caught inside your wall of elements will take additional damage from your light and heavies. That's very important. This must be down all the time. Now, don't panic. If you do not have the Maelstrom weapon, you can put a different weapon on the back. You can put a crafted weapon of your choice, but just remember that it's a 2-piece bonus. So if you want to utilize something really hefty, you don't have Mage's Guild skills on your back bar, remember. So we're down by 4% magicka on our back bar. You could use a willpower flame staff on the back to give you an extra 1.4k max magicka on there and even out the odds. Really, really nice indeed if you don't have the Maelstrom. Of course, your lights and heavies will be down a bit because you won't have this bonus, but your flat stats will be equal on both sides. Really, really handy. So there's an option for you. We are using 2-piece Groftar, infused helmet, and Divine's shoulder. That's very, very important. One has to be medium, one has to be heavy. Doesn't matter in which order, just make sure they're both different weights. The shoulder and the helmet, although the helmet is larger, so you want to put the infused glyph on there to get the biggest bonus, their resistances are exactly the same. So you can mix and match. It doesn't matter which order it's in. And of course, the last set, which some people are going to laugh about until they see the dummy pass, is Destruction Mastery. Infused on the big pieces, Divines on the small for the entire setup, regardless of what order you've put your set in. Now, this will give you max magicka, it will give you spell crit again, so we've got nice spell crit, spell damage again, very similar to the bonus spell weave, but the last bonus, while you have a destruction staff equipped, your max magic is increased by 2,400, which is why our magicka is so bloody high. It is insane. That does contribute heavily to our skills and heavily to our light and heavy attacks in Somerset because they made it so that our max stats now contribute a lot more to our weaves than our spell damage used to. And we've got a very good balance of both. We have really good spell damage from the Burn and Spell Weave, we have really good magicka from the Destruction Mastery, and we have flame damage throughout. It is solid. But a key point to remember on this particular setup, remember, Burn and Spell Weave staff, that's incredibly important. And Destruction Mastery must be on your body and or jewelry at all times. You've got to make sure that the main base of this overall setup is that Destruction Mastery is always on you no matter what bar you're on. Now, you can swap this for Sororia in stack and burn situations if you prefer. You will get a little bit more damage out of it, but this one is guaranteed. So in situations where you have to move around in lots and lots of mechanics, Sororio is going to be flatlining because you're going to lose that buff all the time. And in fact, you're going to keep resetting your spell damage bonus and actually put out less damage. But on stack and burns, Sororio will give you about 3 or 4k more DPS. However, because this is with us all the time, we never lose the bonus. We are really, really good passively, even inside mechanics, even inside stack and burns or moving around. This is very, very strong indeed. But the options, of course, are there for you to choose. You don't have to have any trial gear whatsoever, and you'll see that in a dummy pass in a moment. But if you want to, your choice. Jewelry, by the way, is spell damage, spell damage, spell damage, 2 arcane, 1 bloodthirsty to push our execute. As a DK, we don't have any execute. We don't have any execute power whatsoever. But because we have this, our execute, or basically damage that we do under 25%, is heightened by 10%. It's very, very nice indeed. Now, I'm going to go into the champion points, and then I'm going to go over the rotation and show you what it looks like to smack a dummy. Now, we are sitting on, we'll go red tree first. 66 into Ironclad to reduce the incoming single target damage or direct damage that we take. It's not necessarily single, it's direct, anything that hits us in the face. 64 in Hardy, 64 in Elemental Defender. Nearly said expert, so that we reduce the incoming damage of all types by 13%, and of course 19% into thick-skinned, reducing the amount of damage over time we take. Also, pay attention to this passive here. When you break free, the cost of your next stamina ability within 5 seconds is reduced by 80%. We're using Beast Trap, that costs stamina. Now it's really, really cheap if we break free. Utilize that. 15 points into quick recovery, increasing our healing received by 4%. That includes our heals or anything that we receive from somebody else. And of course, you've got Field Physician if you have 10 points in this tree, meaning that while you resurrect someone, and you should be resin the dead bodies, you will take 15% less damage. Pop a damage shield on, res your mates, you take less damage. It's really handy. 51 into Warlord, reducing the cost of break free by 19%. We will need to break free. We do use a stamina bar for our minor force buff. You probably want to make sure that you've got some reduction to cost in here. 75 points into Tenacity, meaning our heavy attacks, our fully charged ones, I might add, will give us an increased 14% back. Don't forget, during off balance, you get double resources back, so this really adds up. Also, 14% into Magicka Recovery, so we can use more abilities, of course. It makes sense to have that. 56 points into Tumbling to reduce the cost of dodge roll. You will be dodge rolling, and I've got 3 points left, so it can go in Shadow Ward. They can't go anywhere without giving me any diminished returns or anything like that, or in fact, any bonuses whatsoever, because I'm going to hit decimals that I can't use. So 3 points into there, or wherever you want. It's entirely to you. 51 points into crit damage. We do have minor force increasing our crit damage. We do want to crit because we've got high crit, and we don't want to miss crit those whips, so we want to increase our damage when we do crit. So that's very, very nice indeed. Also, increases the flame, frost, shock, and magic damage done by 13%. We're doing shit tons of fire. This will boost it. 9 points into spell penetration. Yes, we're using a sharpened weapon. Yes, this does add on top of it. If you're in an optimized situation and you've already done all the maths for everything that your group has definitely got 100% of the time, then of course you can drop this down and put some more points into Elfborn or wherever else you want to put them, Master Arms perhaps. But for flat everyday use for groups, dungeons, and trials, this is actually solid. So it's up to you. 19 points into Staff Expert, increasing our light and heavy attacks, which we will be doing. And also 56 points into Master Arms, increasing our direct damage, including our light attacks, our heavy attacks, our Flames of Oblivion, our whips. I think you can see where I'm going with this. All this in here amounts to 75 points, which unlocks another execute bonus. Remember, we have Bloodthirsty, increasing our execute damage, or our damage under 25% of the boss's health. Also, the Butcher passives makes our light and heavy attacks also do 5% increased damage to enemies that are under 25%. So as this particular setup, we can actually push the enemy down and do more damage during execute, whereas most DKs can't. 61 points into Thaumaturge to increase our damage over time. We do have damage over time abilities. We are using them a lot. Most of our damage, or our force of our damage, is direct, so we want to make sure we pump that up as much as possible while balancing this out. We do not have the Exploiter passive. We are not benefiting from an extra 10% damage done to off-balance targets, because if we do, we're not going to be able to get this passive here, and our execute's going to go down, and our flat direct will go down. So I deliberately didn't do that. However, we still get those very strong whips, because off-balance is a contributor to that particular skill. So when the target is off balance, you want to get those whips in, you want to get your heavy attacks in occasionally. If so, you will still benefit from those. Now, I'm going to show you the rotation. And this is going to be not as complicated as you might think. First of all, obviously, you want to make sure Flames of Oblivion is running. As you will see, it doesn't affect the target unless I aggro it. Then it will fire at him. You can actually safely run around with this and not hit a damn thing, as long as you are not in combat. So make sure that's running before you start. Get a Beast Trap in straight away. because then you've got your minor force buff active. Now, to start with, Eruption, Light Attack, Engulf in Flames, Light Attack, Wall of Elements, swap bars. Very, very simple. One skill, Light Flames, Light Wall, swap. Really, really simple stuff. Front bar, very, very easy. You got two options here. You Light Attack and then Burn in Embers. Remember the claw. Then you Light Attack Whip 4 times. Then you Light Attack Beast Trap and swap. I'll show you what that looks like in case that's confusing. Light Claw, Light Whip, Light Whip, Light Whip, Light Whip, Light Beast Trap, swap. That's your front bar. Now, when you come to the back bar again, remember Eruption lasts 18 seconds. Our rotation's like 10, 12, something like that. We don't want to cast that again. It's just wasting resources. This time round, we use Flames of Oblivion instead. Then Light Breath, Light Wall, swap. So the first rotation is Eruption, Light Breath, Light Wall, swap. When you come back, it's Flames of Oblivion, Light Breath, Light Wall, swap. Come back again, Eruption. You see what I mean? Every back bar rotation you alternate. One time you do this, the next time you do this. That will keep uptime on both of them, because this is 18 seconds, so that will fall off just as you're about to reapply it. And also, the Flames of Oblivion will fall off, it will fire its last tick, but instead of waiting for a full 5 seconds to go again, you can actually activate it just as it's about to be ready. It's really, really handy. Now, I'm going to show you what that looks like in full rotation. Beast Trap, Flames, Light Wall, Light Claw, Light Whip, Light Whip, Light Whip, Beast Trap, Flames, Breath, Wall swap, and again, and you just repeat, repeat, repeat. Now, if your sustain is struggling, maybe you don't have Ellie Drain running, maybe your group's not throwing out shapes in the form of synergies and such as much as they should be, all that good stuff, you can change your front bar rotation. You can go Light Claw, Heavy Whip, Light Whip, Light Beast Trap. Now, instead of 4 lights, 4 whips, you do 1 heavy, 1 light with 2 whips. The damage is roughly the same across the board because you are still doing a really big heavy attack as long as you crit, and of course you will get sustain back for doing so. Obviously, if you've got loads and loads of sustain, you're not struggling, just whip your hell out of that target skeleton. But if you don't, obviously that's what you can pay attention to. Don't go all the way to 0 and then start heavy attacking. If you get under sort of 30%, you might want to start using it. Now, I'm going to show you what this looks like on a target skeleton. First of all, the first demonstration is using Elemental Drain. So I do have a little bit of sustain, and I have Major Breach, which is the same as every other DPS pass in the world. And you'll see what this does flat out. Then, you'll see what happens if you introduce Off Balance, which should be there pretty much in any group, dungeon, trial, whatever. You'll have someone running some form of lightning or knocking the target off balance, or blocking a heavy attack and knocking the target off balance, whatever. In those situations, I show you how effective the Flame Lash Whip is, how strong that backflip introduced once every 15 seconds is for 5 seconds. You can use it twice over 5 seconds, because that's how long Off Balance lasts, every 2 rotations. And I don't think I get it quite that often on the target dummy, but you'll get to see how effective it is nonetheless. Anyway, here we go. So, hopefully that helped. Hopefully that wasn't too boring. Just remember, of course, the Destruction Mastery set can be swapped out for Sororia if you want to go that far, and you will get an extra 3 to 4k DPS out of it. However, if you're comfortable with Destruction Mastery, you want to keep that bonus all the time while in mechanics, then Destruction Mastery and Burn and Spellweave is absolutely fine, as you can see. Anyway, first of all, thank you all very, very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support, and if you are not subscribing, please do hit that button. It is free. Also, if you want to help support outside of YouTube, there are some links in the description for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com. Once again, thank you all very, very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.